What if I told you that your biggest setback could become your greatest comeback? That the very thing trying to break you might be preparing you for your life's greatest victory? In the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you the most powerful lesson I learned during 27 years behind bars. A lesson that transformed not just my life, but an entire nation. This isn't just another inspirational story. This is a blueprint for turning your pain into power, your obstacles into opportunities, and your defeats into your destiny. Whether you're facing a career crisis, a broken relationship, financial struggles, or feeling trapped by circumstances beyond your control, what you're about to discover will show you how to find freedom even in the darkest of prisons. Are you ready to transform your perspective on failure? Are you prepared to discover how forgiveness can become your greatest weapon? Then stay with me, because by the end of this journey, you'll never look at your challenges the same way again. My name is Nelson Mandela, and I want to share with you the most important lesson of my life. A lesson that cost me 27 years of freedom, but gave me something infinitely more valuable: the power to transform hatred into hope and prison into purpose. You see, every great transformation begins with a spark, a moment when you realize that your current reality is not your final destiny. For me, that spark ignited long before I ever saw the inside of a prison cell. It began when I witnessed the daily humiliation of my people under apartheid, a system that treated human beings like animals based solely on the color of their skin. But here's what I learned. The spark isn't enough. Anyone can feel angry about injustice. Anyone can complain about unfair circumstances. The real question is, what will you do with that fire burning inside you? Will you let it consume you with bitterness? Or will you forge it into a weapon for change? I chose to become a lawyer, then an activist, fighting for equality through every legal means possible. But the system had other plans for me. They wanted to silence the voice that dared to dream of a free South Africa. They wanted to extinguish the spark that was spreading from person to person, community to community. What they didn't understand was that you cannot kill an idea whose time has come. You cannot imprison a dream that lives in the hearts of millions. And most importantly, you cannot defeat a person who has discovered that their purpose is bigger than their pain. The spark they tried to snuff out was about to become an unstoppable fire. It was 1962. I was 44 years old when those cold metal bars first closed behind me, and suddenly I was no longer Nelson Mandela, lawyer and activist. I became prisoner 466/64, just another number in the system designed to break the human spirit. Robben Island wasn't just a prison. It was a symbol of everything wrong with our society. Located 7 miles off the coast of Cape Town, this rocky outcrop had been used for centuries to isolate those who challenged authority. Lepers, political prisoners, criminals. We were all thrown together on this island of despair, forgotten by the world. The conditions were deliberately harsh. We woke before dawn to the sound of guards banging on metal bars. Breakfast was thin porridge and coffee that tasted like dirty water. Then came the backbreaking labor, crushing stones in the limestone quarry under the scorching African sun. The white dust got into our lungs, our eyes, our very souls. It was meant to crush us slowly, methodically. But here's what my captors didn't understand. They had given me something precious: time to think, time to plan, time to transform my anger into strategy. While they thought they were punishing me, I was actually attending the most expensive university in the world, the University of Adversity. Every night, as I lay on that thin mattress on the concrete floor, I would stare at the ceiling and make a choice. I could either let this place destroy me, or I could use this time to become the leader my people needed. I chose growth over bitterness. I chose preparation over despair. Because I understood that this wasn't my destination. It was my preparation. The system wasn't just trying to imprison my body. It was waging war against my spirit. Every day brought new attempts to break me down. Solitary confinement, denial of letters from my family, guards who seemed to take pleasure in our suffering. But the cruelest punishment wasn't physical. It was watching my life pass by through a tiny window. My children grew up without their father. My wife Winnie faced harassment, imprisonment, and threats while I sat helpless behind bars. Christmas mornings came and went without Daddy's hugs. Birthdays were missed. School graduations happened without me there to celebrate. The guilt was suffocating. How could I claim to be fighting for my people when I couldn't even be there for my own family? The guards would remind us daily that the world had forgotten about us. No one cares about you terrorists, they would sneer. You're going to rot here while life goes on without you. And sometimes in the darkest moments, I almost believed them. The silence from the outside world was deafening. Were we making any difference at all? But the hardest battle wasn't against the guards or the system. It was against the voice in my own head that whispered, maybe they're right. Maybe you chose wrong. Maybe this sacrifice is meaningless. Every prisoner faces this moment when the walls seem to close in and hope feels like a luxury you can't afford. I watched strong men break under the pressure. I saw activists become bitter shells of their former selves. I witnessed the slow death of dreams crushed under the weight of seemingly endless years. And I realized that my greatest enemy wasn't apartheid. It was a temptation to give up on the very vision that had brought me here in the first place. But in that cold, cramped cell, surrounded by despair, I cultivated something that seemed impossible. A dream so audacious that even I sometimes questioned my sanity. I didn't just want to end apartheid. I wanted to create something that had never existed in human history. A rainbow nation where former enemies could become partners in building something beautiful together. Late at night, when the prison fell silent except for the distant sound of waves crashing against Robben Island shores, I would close my eyes and envision it. Black children and white children playing together in the same parks. Families of all colors sharing the same neighborhoods, the same schools, the same dreams for their futures. I saw boardrooms where decisions were made not based on racial quotas, but on merit and wisdom. I imagined a South Africa that could be a beacon of hope to the world. My fellow prisoners thought I was naive. Mandela, they would say during our whispered conversations in the quarry, these people have oppressed us for centuries. They will never willingly share power. They will never see us as equals. And I understood their skepticism. The evidence certainly seemed to support their cynicism. But I had discovered something powerful, the human heart's capacity for transformation. I had seen Afrikaner guards who initially treated us with contempt slowly begin to show respect as they witnessed our dignity under pressure. I had watched hardened prisoners find redemption through education and self-reflection. If change was possible in this place, it was possible anywhere. My dream wasn't just about political freedom. It was about emotional and spiritual liberation for everyone. Because I realized that hatred imprisons a hater just as much as a hated. A truly free South Africa would need to free both the oppressed and the oppressor from the chains of racial prejudice. That was the impossible dream that kept me alive through 27 years of captivity. But how do you forgive the unforgivable? How do you extend your hand to those who have crushed your people for generations? As the years dragged on and negotiations for my release finally began, I faced the most difficult challenge of my life. Not fighting my enemies, but convincing my own allies that reconciliation was possible. Mandela, you've lost your mind, some of my closest comrades would say. These people have murdered our children, tortured our families, stolen our land. And you want us to forgive them? You want us to work with them? Their anger was justified. Their pain was real. Their thirst for revenge was understandable. But I had learned something crucial during those long nights in my cell. Revenge is just another form of prison. The internal battle was fierce. Part of me wanted to see our oppressors suffer as we had suffered. Part of me wanted them to feel the humiliation, the powerlessness, the despair we had endured. The human side of me craved justice that looked like punishment. But the leader in me understood that true justice had to look like transformation. My own organization, the African National Congress, was split. Some wanted armed revolution. Others demanded economic warfare, and a few supported my vision of peaceful transition. The pressure was immense. How could I ask people who had lost everything to give up their righteous anger? How could I convince mothers who had buried their children to shake hands with their killers? But the greatest obstacle wasn't external resistance. It was a voice inside my head that questioned whether I was being foolish or wise, weak or strong. Was I betraying my people by choosing forgiveness over vengeance? Or was I leading them towards something greater than they had ever imagined? The weight of that decision nearly crushed me, because I realized that getting this wrong wouldn't just affect me. It would determine the fate of an entire nation. Then came February 11th, 1990, the day that changed everything. After 27 years, 6 months, and 6 days, I walked out of Victor Verster prison as a free man. But freedom, I discovered, isn't just about opening prison doors. It's about opening your heart to possibilities you never thought possible. That first step outside was surreal. The world had changed completely while I was inside. There were cameras everywhere, people shouting my name, reporters asking questions I hadn't prepared for. But the most important moment wasn't captured by any camera. It was when I came face to face with F.W. de Klerk, the man who represented everything I had fought against for decades. When I shook his hand, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just a political gesture. It was a choice that would define the next chapter of South Africa's story. I looked into the eyes of my former enemy and saw not a monster, but a man who was also trying to do what he believed was right for his people. And in that moment, I understood the most powerful truth of my life. Transformation begins when you see your enemy's humanity. The crowds expected me to speak of revolution, of payback, of evening the score. Instead, I spoke of reconciliation, of building a nation where all could live in dignity. Many were confused. Some were angry. But I had learned something that only 27 years of imprisonment could teach. True power isn't the ability to destroy your enemies. It's the ability to transform them into allies. That handshake with de Klerk wasn't weakness. It was the strongest thing I had ever done, because I realized that the real revolution wasn't happening in the streets or in the halls of government. It was happening in the hearts and minds of people who were choosing hope over hatred, building over burning, unity over division. The boy who had entered prison full of anger was gone. The man who walked out was ready to heal a nation. 3 years later, in December 1993, F.W. de Klerk and I stood together in Oslo, Norway, receiving the Nobel Peace Prize. As I looked out at that distinguished audience, I wasn't just representing myself. I was representing every person who had ever dared to believe that enemies could become partners, that hatred could transform into healing. The value of this award which we share, I said, will and must be measured by the joyful peace which triumphs, because a common humanity that bonds black and white into one human race would have told each of us that we should live like the children of paradise. These weren't just words. They were a declaration that the impossible dream had become reality. But the real victory wasn't the prize or the applause. It was what I had become through the process. The angry young man who had entered prison in 1962 had been transformed into someone who understood that true leadership isn't about winning battles. It's about healing wounds. My 27 years weren't lost years. They were invested years that had prepared me for this moment. Standing there with my former enemy, now my partner in peace, I realized that every day of suffering had been worth it. Every night of loneliness had taught me empathy. Every moment of despair had deepened my compassion. Every experience of injustice had strengthened my commitment to justice for all people, not just my own. The prison that was meant to break me had actually made me. The isolation that was intended to silence me had taught me to listen to my enemy's fears, to my people's pain, to my own heart's wisdom. And now I understood why I had to walk that difficult path. Because someone had to prove that forgiveness is stronger than revenge, that love is more powerful than hate, and that transformation is always possible, even in the darkest circumstances. Today, as I reflect on this journey, I want you to understand something crucial. This isn't just my story. It's a blueprint for your own transformation. Every person faces their own form of apartheid, their own prison walls, their own seemingly impossible circumstances. The question isn't whether you have the strength to survive them. It's whether you have the wisdom to let them shape you into who you're meant to become. Maybe you're facing bankruptcy and feel like a failure. Maybe you've been betrayed by someone you trusted and your heart is filled with bitterness. Maybe you've lost a job, a relationship, or a dream that defined your identity. I'm here to tell you that your current prison might be preparing you for your greatest purpose. Your setback might be setting you up for an incredible comeback. The principles that freed South Africa can free you too. First, see your challenges as your university, not your cemetery. Every difficulty is teaching you something you need to know for what's coming next. Second, Choose forgiveness not because others deserve it, but because you deserve to be free from the poison of resentment. Third, believe that your impossible dream isn't impossible. It's just unprecedented. Your story isn't over. In fact, if you're facing your darkest hour right now, you might be closer to your breakthrough than you think. The same power that transformed a prisoner into a president, that turned enemies into allies, that changed a nation's destiny lives inside you right now. So I ask you, what prison are you ready to walk out of? What enemy are you ready to forgive? What impossible dream are you finally ready to pursue? The door is open. The choice is yours. And the world is waiting to see what you'll build with the lessons your struggles have taught you. Your time is now. Share in the comments. What challenge in your life could become your greatest classroom? How can you choose hope over hatred in your current situation? Your story of transformation might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.